What's up, y'all? So, shout out to Fightful for this, but this is Jake Roberts, who says that Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart are the worst world champions ever. So, let's read this story and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. All right, so Jake the Snake Roberts shares his honest thoughts on both Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. During an interview with Flip the Script, Roberts called both Michaels and Hart the worst champions in the WWF days. Roberts based his statement on the fact that neither of them were able to draw big crowds on a regular basis during their time as champion. Roberts looked at Michaels, and although he gave him credit for being a great in-ring worker, and him not being a big guy did hurt him a bit. Now here's the quote from Jake Roberts. Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, those chumps needed the title. Nobody paid attention to them. Michaels was in a tag team, and they were pretty good. And they made the girls say, ooh, but that's it. That's about it. Michaels worked his ass off. I'll give him that. He performed his ass off. But was he a good champion? Hell no. Did he put asses to seats? Not that many. Check the books. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels were the worst champions of all. They did not put money in the bank. Shawn Michaels had the it factor, but he was 215 pounds. And in my day, you're getting in the ring with 275, 300, 350-pound guys. Then you got Andre, who's 550 pounds. Can you imagine Shawn going up against Andre? My case is closed. Now, Roberts gave his pick as who's the best champion. He said, that's easy, Steve Austin. Oh, Lord have mercy. Okay, first things first, we need to realize is the new generation era of the WWE is the lowest drawing era of the WWE, which is between when Hogan left in '93 till about 1997, around the time that the Attitude Era kicked off. So the new generation is actually when I actually started watching wrestling, right? I mean, that's really when I started paying attention. Like, I've been watching wrestling since like 1990, but I really wasn't a pure wrestling fan until about, the Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart era. So this really kind of hits me to my soul that he says something like this. But this is absolutely true. Almost all of the champions around this time did not draw that well. Mostly because there was not a lot of competition for them to work with other than each other. So there were three top guys during the new generation era. There was Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker. Notice that all three of them are baby faces. And WWE does not typically do babyface versus babyface matches. So essentially you had to microwave heels for them to wrestle. So you would have, Shawn, or rather Bret, having one-off matches with this heel or that heel. He had a one-off match with Razor Ramon. After Bret beat Razor didn't do anything until he turned babyface, which I don't remember how long that took. But Razor debuted as kind of a really hot babyface, really hot heel. I mean, and then Bret beat him at the Royal Rumble in 1993, I think. Yeah, 1993. Bret beat him, and Razor was a babyface, I think later that year and the next year. So, he was hot at the time, Razor, but it didn't work out. And there was no other hot heels in the company. The British Bulldog, no. Yokozuna was champion for a lot of 1994. Was it 1994, am I thinking? 1994? Yes. WrestleMania 9, which is 1993, is WrestleMania 9. So 1993 and 1994, a lot of that was Yokozuna. And then you had Diesel, which is all of 95, most of 95. And, so is he lying about did they draw? No, he's not lying. I mean, it's absolutely true that Bret and Shawn were not the biggest draws in the world. Bret was a big draw in Europe. Shawn was, They did a stadium show in San Antonio for the Royal Rumble of 1997. I think they did pretty good there, but of course people claimed that it was papered and all that type of stuff. But that part, I mean, I get it. And he's deciding who is a group champion by who drew money. But at the same time, I think Diesel is the actual worst drawing champion of all time. So he's not absolutely correct. I think Diesel, Kevin Nash, is the worst drawing champion. I think he's a worse drawing champion than both Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. So if he's looking at it from that perspective, he's not correct. The era of Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart did not draw like the era of Hogan or the era of Austin. But Ultimate Warrior also didn't draw like Hogan, So who knows? But let's talk about this weight thing. So this guy, he said Shawn Michaels 215. Bret probably wasn't much bigger, and I know Bret kind of took some steroids to beef up a little bit, but Bret and Shawn routinely, if you saw the Bret and Shawn documentary, they did a documentary where they was face to face. It was the Versus documentary, and where Bret and Shawn are both in the room talking. They're talking to Jim Ross, and they both was talking about having to deal with the quote unquote dinosaurs who didn't think they were big enough or good enough to really make it. In this piece here, you see Jake Roberts is talking about Michaels is in a tag team and they were pretty good and they made the girls say, ooh. He's talking about the Rockers, right? So Shawn used to always talk about the Rockers being too small and guys didn't want to sell for them. And that you would have bigger guys who would say, I won't bump for you if you drop kick me. I'll have to take a double drop kick from him and Marty Jannetty. So the only way I'll take the bump is if I get drop kicked by both of you. And Shawn would say like that mentality continued for a really long time, and it really did put a chip on Shawn's shoulder. So it actually Bret's too, because Bret is another one who also used to talk about the quote unquote dinosaurs, and basically we're talking about guys like Paul Orndorff. And Paul Orndorff was one of the guys who made an interview a couple of years back, and he was talking about Bret being too small and Bret being one of the worst champions ever, and all that sort of thing. This is a routine sort of mentality for guys of this age. Guys like Jake Roberts don't consider Shawn and Bret great champions because they were too small. They were small guys, and that's just something we got to deal with. Not, do I agree? No, because I think that some of his information is obviously wrong because, again, Kevin Nash was the lowest drawing champion of all time. And, but it doesn't change the fact that he worked in the WWE at the time, which was 1996. I think he came back in 96 or he came back in 95. I forget which one. But Jake Roberts came back during the New Generation era after he left in the early 90s. So he was in the building for a lot of that stuff. And, he had that match with Jerry Lawler at the 96 Royal Rumble. And not Royal Rumble, SummerSlam. And that was pretty much the highlight of his run. Oh, yeah, and being the guy that Steve Austin beat for the King of the Ring. So that was pretty much it. But Shawn and Bret could not really draw because there were no hot heels for them to work with. And you could say that's Vince's fault because he did essentially book a lot of the heels to just get beat. I mean, Diesel had the same problem. Outside of Yokozuna and Sid, there were no major villains for them to fight. Vader was brought in early in 96, late 95, early 96. By June, nobody really wanted to work with Vader. Bret Hart said in his Broken Skull sessions that Vader was known for hurting people. Shawn Michaels said the same thing. Jim Cornette has said the same thing. Bruce Pritchard has said the same thing. Mick Foley has said the same thing. So nobody really wanted to work with Vader. So anybody who would say, well, you had Vader to work with, nobody wanted to work with Vader because he was very stiff, and they particularly didn't like that style. The only other option you had was Mick Foley, and I think Mick was working with Undertaker mostly in 96. When Mick came in, he was mostly working with Undertaker, and there was nobody else. Literally everybody else was a holdover from the early 90s. So you had, Owen Hart, who was there from the early 90s, and you had the British Bulldog, and I think Jeff Jarrett was middling around in there. And Yoko, who had his weight was kind of really over the top. There are some Shawn Michaels Yokozuna matches, and Yokozuna probably weighed more or as much as Andre the Giant, because I knew at some point Yoko was like 600 pounds or some nonsense like that. And I think there's one or two. I believe I'm doing all this off memory, by the way. I believe there was a Yokozuna Shawn Michaels match from an episode of Raw that I remember. That was probably in 1996 when Shawn was super champion. They always had that Superman phase where the guys are virtually unbeatable. And I remember there being a Yokozuna Shawn Michaels match on one of those Raw episodes. So can I imagine Andre fighting Shawn Michaels? Absolutely not. And absolutely not. But I say that it's not really their fault because Yoko had a big hand in that company being champion at the time, and I don't consider him. I don't think he was a top draw either, even though nobody talks about whether Yoko really made money or not. But I don't remember Yoko making a lot of money. I remember Lex Luger was also in that mix. You know, they pushing him to be the top babyface for a while. It didn't really get over. Diesel was another one. He really didn't get over. Undertaker had no real opponents other than Mankind. I mean, they had kind of devalued him a little bit with the whole Giant Gonzalez shit and King Kong Bundy shit and the Mabel shit, you know, getting his face broken. It was just a lot of stupid stuff going on in the new generation. So I don't really think that it's Bret and Shawn's fault. You know, I think that it was just the era that they came up in. And I think some people are going to say similar things, I think, about Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns 10, 15 years in the future. People are going to be like, well, they, you know, maybe say Seth Rollins was too small or he wasn't a draw or whatever. And maybe that would be the case. But, you know, these guys aren't alone in this, you know. And Hogan didn't draw by himself, you know. Like, Hogan had some really hot angles, you know, like as far as he had that long-running feud with Roddy Piper where he never actually beat Roddy Piper. So you can say that that helped. You know, they had the feud with Paul Orndorff where they did the whole Hogan, or they kept doing that. The Hogan's friends turn on him. They doing that right now with Cody, right? Where they do like Cody's friends turn on him and stuff like that. But they used to do that with Hogan. Hogan would bring in somebody. Hogan would be partners with it or friends with this guy for a while, and then Hogan's friends would turn on him. They did it with Paul Orndorff. They did it with Andre. They did it with Randy Savage, and it worked every time. Every time it made money, and that's why they kept doing it. And that was a big reason why Hulkamania continued to work, is because they had a formula with Hogan that they did not let go. You know, they kept doing the same shit with Hogan. Meanwhile, when it came to Bret Hart, they were, you know, trying to match him up with, you know, being a work rate guy. Naturally, people aren't really going to be that interested in the work rate guy, and he wasn't a big personality. But there also were just no heels for him to work with. I mean, what were you going to do outside of his long feud with Owen? Bret really had a bunch of shorter feuds, and Shawn also had a bunch of short feuds. You know, a month or two. That's it. You know, he didn't really have a chance to go around the bend like Hogan and Randy Savage. Where they had this year-long situation that led to, you know, the mega powers exploding. Bret and Shawn didn't have that. You know, they also didn't have an Ultimate Warrior or a Randy Savage also on. Well, Randy Savage was being, of course, devalued. If they had used Randy Savage appropriately, maybe the new generation could have been better off. But they were devaluing a lot of the older guys, and some of the younger guys just was not at that level that they needed him to be, that Vince and company needed them to be. So I'm not saying that Jake is 100% wrong. Maybe Shawn and Bret are too small. They were like 6'1", which just says a lot because there's a lot of guys now who are even smaller than they are. You know, like Adam Cole and Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan is smaller than Drew Gulak. Okay, so, and Drew Gulak was the cruiserweight champion, and Daniel Bryan's even smaller than him. So I think that he makes a decent point, but it's kind of unfair because you had to look at what they were up against and what they were doing. And it was at a time where, you know, the steroid trial was going on and it had ended, and that really kind of damaged the business. And there was just a lot of stuff going on at the new generation era. And this is what this is. This is an indictment of the new generation era. That's what this is. This is about the new generation era basically being a flop, which it was, of course. Even though Bret and Shawn are two of the cornerstones of why Stone Cold Steve Austin ended up becoming a big star. And, you know, because he got to work with Shawn and Bret. So they made Austin. So, I mean, they didn't do too bad. All right, so Jake Roberts, boy. This is going to get some, this should be talked about more often because this kind of stuff comes up a lot. But what do you guys think? Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you later. Peace. This is an addendum to the Jake Roberts saying Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart are the worst champions ever. This is an interview from Paul Orndorff, who was WWF main eventer in the 1980s. We're going to skip all of this stuff about him talking about working with Ric Flair. This is from, which site is this from? This is from the SmackDown Hotel. So shout out to SmackDown Hotel. Thank you guys, because I'm definitely about to use this material. So there's Vince, so he's talking about Hogan, he's talking about Warrior right here. But this is particularly the part that I like to talk about. On giving the belt to smaller guys like Savage and Bret, Orndorff said, no, absolutely not. It's like putting the belt on someone who wants to be a wrestler. It didn't work. It downgraded, made the belt worthless. When Terry Funk, Harley Race had world titles, it meant more. On the 1993, Hogan wouldn't drop the belt to Bret in 1993 rumor. Orndorff said, I don't blame him. I wouldn't have either. Bret Hart was a nobody from Canada, and Hogan was the greatest star in wrestling. I don't blame him. He did the right thing. And this is the attitude of guys from the 80s. This is how they felt about small guys working in the business, and this is what Shawn and Bret had to deal with in the locker room. You know, these guys who saw them as nothing but tag team wrestlers, and that's it. So when you see that Bret is a complete mark for himself, this is why. When you see that Shawn was being a complete and total dickhead, this is why. You know, this type of stuff pops up an awful lot in these interviews with older guys, if they just don't like smaller guys. So, I mean, it is what it is. So, thank you guys. I'll talk to you later.